Hey everyone. So this is the second video for emotion, which is looking at how we respond to emotions, and then we take, for some reason, AP Psych focuses on stress as it's like highlighted emotion for some reason, but then we focus on like what stress can do um, to the mind and body. So super short video, super short set of notes overall. This would be one of those days in classes where, or in class where we would be done like really early. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump right in. So catharsis. So anytime you have an emotional response to something, good or bad, if you've ever heard the expression a cathartic experience, something being cathartic, it means that you release emotions in some way. Now, everyone does this differently. Some people release emotions violently, um, and some people do it through um, other means like non-physical acts and things. So basically, think of a cathartic experience like if you're really mad, you slam a door. That can be a cathartic experience. You release your anger. Theoretically, you kind of release it on the door. You slam it, you feel better for a little bit, and then you probably go right back to being angry. At least that's been my experience in the past. Um, but it's a release. Um, it can be a physiological thing. Some people when they're sad, when they're angry, sometimes happy, they cry. That's a cathartic experience. You release an emotion in that way. Um, I know it says releasing aggressive energy on the slide, but really cathartic experiences can be good or bad. Um, but usually it's usually associated with negative or hostile emotions. Like yelling, screaming, slamming, crying, those kind of things are usually referred to as cathartic experiences. Um, some people work out when they're angry or stressed. Eating, some people eat. You know, I may or may not know about that, but some people when they're stressed they eat a lot or whatever. All of those can be considered cathartic. Some people do it, like I said earlier, some people do it through non physical stuff. Like some people, if they're stressed or if they're sad or if they're angry, they write a song or they write a poem or they sing. I don't know. Like it doesn't have to be like a physical act necessarily. But anything that where you release emotions, healthy or unhealthy, is considered a cathartic experience. Um, the thing about cathartic experiences or catharsis is that it can also build up in a person. So, in other words, like if you always are violent when you're angry, then there might be a chance that violence is put on another person at some point. If you always uh, slam or punch things, then you may eventually punch I don't know, a person. I mean, it can be anything, but in other words, catharsis can amplify hostile feelings and amplify hostility. Um, and it can also be habit forming. In other words, like if you always, when you're stressed, if you always go to the gym and hit a punching bag, then you're going to always want to do that when you're stressed, no matter where you are. If you always smoke a cigarette, hypothetically, um, when you're stressed out, you're always going to want a cigarette. It can be habit forming. But again, anytime you hear the word catharsis or something being cathartic, that refers to an emotional response or a release of emotion in some way. Um, okay. Feel good, do good phenomenon. This is exactly what it sounds like. We are more likely to help people and to be a good person to people when we are already in a good mood. I mean, I think I think we've all experienced that. I think if we're having a good day and we're in a good mood and someone asks us for help or, we run into someone on the street that needs help, maybe a flat tire or something, if we're in a good mood or we are going to be way more likely to help them if we're in a good mood ourselves. On the flip side of that, Uh, I think usually every year, I don't say every year, but most years I have somebody ask, well, wait, what is it? Is it the same way opposite, or is there a feel bad, do bad phenomenon? And I don't necessarily think that there is a like if you feel bad, you're automatically going to be mean or mad or bad to others. But yeah, kind of. If you're in a bad mood, you're probably going to be way more likely to be negative towards others if you are already in a bad mood. Um, but it sounds bad to say that. So anyway, um, but anyway, feel good, do good is just saying that it's just one of those kind of unexplainable things that when we are in it, like that has been proven over and over again that when we are in a good mood or we are feeling happy or positive about life or the world around us, we are going to be way more likely to help others and be a good person to others when we're in that mood. Okay, and then subjective well-being. This is our self-perceived happiness or satisfaction with life. Um, so this is kind of weird because it so I'll say weird. That sounded bad. It's interesting because there are some people who think that like, there's some people that are completely 100% content and happy with their lives, and we would look at their life and be like, really, like you're happy with that? And then on the flip side of that, there are people that are unhappy with their life, and we look at them and we're like, how can you be unhappy? Um, because normally we not only do we have our own self-perceived happiness with our own life, but then we use that to measure kind of how we look at others. Um, those are objective well-being. So, for example, um, if I were to look at a celebrity, hypothetically, if I were to look at someone who has a ton of money, ton of fame, all that stuff, um, and they say something about being unhappy, and I say something along the line, and I think something along the lines of like, how can you be unhappy? You have money, you have fame, you have fortune, everybody loves you. That's an objective measurement. I'm objectively measuring their life through my own understanding of, or my own objective measurements of what it means to be happy. I look at them having a lot of money, fame, fortune, all that. I look at all that and be like, that would make me happy, so therefore they should be happy. But that's not always the case. Um, just like if I look at someone who is happy with not having a lot of money or not having a good situation, in my opinion, and I'm like, how can they be happy? Again, same thing. I'm objectively measuring them with my own understanding of what it means to be happy. That's subjective. Subjective is what I view myself, my own self perceived, and then I measure others with objective well being, good or bad. Okay, makes sense. Hopefully, I don't know why I just asked you that. You're not going to answer. But anyway, moving on. Um, okay, stress. For some reason, you'd think that AP Psych would focus on a different emotion, like I don't know, happiness, sadness, anger, whatever. But they tend to focus on stress. So stress is defined as the emotional response to demands that are perceived as threatening or exceeding our reasonable ability to cope, or the resources that we have to cope with stress. Some people are way better at dealing with stress than others. I am not good at dealing with stress. If I'm stressed out, you know it. You see it on my face, you see it in my language, or you hear it in my language, you see it in my actions. I am not good at handling stress. Just ask my wife. Um, any little stressor is going to set me off if I'm stressed out. Some people are really good. Some people can compartmentalize is what I was trying to say there before my tongue said no. Um, some people are really good at compartmentalizing stress. In other words, if they're stressed at work, they don't bring stress from work home. I need to get better at that. Some people are really good at leaving stress where it should be. Um, but anything that triggers a stressful response is considered a stressor. So this could be waking up late. You're automatically stressed, therefore it's a stressor. You have a test, you're stressed. You have college applications due, you're stressed. Those are all stressors. Your boyfriend or girlfriend is just being a pain. That's a stressor. Um, it could literally be anything. Whatever stresses you out can be considered a stressor. And what stressors do is, or let me back up. If you have enough stressors compounded on one another and you're constantly stressed, there are going to be physiological, emotional, and psychological effects to stress. Um, there is like very few people can deal with stress 24/7 and not have effects on their emotional and physical health. And I'll get more into that in just a minute. But so this guy here, Hans, I think you say it Selye, but it could be. I've never actually looked up how to say that, but I think it's Selye. Uh, but he devoted his entire career to studying stress and the effects that it has on our thinking and behavior and our physiological well-being. So he came up with a description or I don't want to say a theory because pretty much everything he says in this has been proven to be true. It's not really a theory, it's more of just a model for how we deal with stress as human beings. And he called it the general adaptation syndrome. And the reason he called it that is because our bodies and minds adapt to stress all the time, but constant and prolonged exposure to stress, eventually we're not going to be able to adapt to it and there are going to be negative effects. And like I said, I'll explain all that in just a minute. So his syndrome or his description of how we deal with stress has three parts to it, has three stages: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. So alarm is just when we encounter a stressful event, any stressful event, small, large, anything. Um, Basically, what this kind of goes back to the fight or flight syndrome or fight or flight response we talked about back in Unit 2. But basically, what this says is that when we counter or when we confront a stressful event, again, small, large, whatever, our body uses resources to deal with that. So, in other words, like there may be chemical changes, hormonal imbalance, things like that initially, and that's what this image on the right is trying to show you is that this little dip. Let me try to highlight it real quick. Um, this this little this little dip right here on the image is those resources being mobilized. Basically, what it's saying is that we encounter something stressful or whatever, our body has to use resources to deal with it. So therefore, it's a drop in our resistance to stress. We are more likely to be stressed out at that moment, which makes perfect sense. So that's the alarm stage. And then the second stage, which is this kind of orange part in the middle, is the resistance stage. So what this says is that as we deal with stress, as we use our bodily resources to deal with it, um, we are better at resisting stress over time. In other words, um, our body is pretty good at dealing with stress um, uh, when we encounter it. In other words, we can put up with it for a while. Our body is tremendous at doing that. However, um, we also have I'm sorry, I'm trying to get rid of these. Um, uh, Let me see. There we go. Erase all link. So um, we our resources are finite though. Basically, they're gradually depleted. If we are constantly exposed to stress in this stage, there are going to possibly be some negative side effects like ulcers or blood pressure or whatever. However, eventually we may reach this third stage, which is exhaustion, which is this third stage over here. And you can see the sharp decline. This is basically what this says is that once we get to this point, our body can't deal with stress anymore. So in other words, we have to. So based somewhere in this second stage here, the resistance stage, what Selye or Han Selye is saying is that we have to find a way to get rid of stress and replenish our resources, or we can have very negative side effects, illness, collapse. He even said death. And I hate to generalize, but if you look at people who are in very high stress jobs, the longer they are in those jobs, their health seems to decrease or their physical appearance seems to decrease. This is what I always bring up. Um, if you look at most presidents that you can do this with, like that have photographic evidence, like if you look at the presidents who, right as they go into office, and then when they leave office, especially two-term presidents, they have usually aged dramatically because and the reason I bring that up is because when you're constantly stressed in that scenario, like you are as the leader of the free world and the head of a nation, and you have those constant stressors 24 hours a day for the most part, you are going to have physical and emotional effects. You are going to age maybe more dramatically than you would naturally. Um, Now, some of it's just normal aging, but then some of it's like accelerated. Like I always, again, regardless of what you think of him politically, if you look at President Obama, when he went in 2008, physically, he was this young, vibrant, you know, young man. Well, I say young. He was I think the second youngest president ever elected, behind Kennedy. Uh, if you look at him when he went into office, and when he left office in 2017, before President Trump took over, if you look at him then, he aged dramatically. He had no gray hair when he went in, or at least didn't look like it. A lot when he left. His skin looked different. Um, and the reason I bring this up is that there are natural effects to stress, and you have to find an outlet. The reason that there are so many like stress release things and stress ways to get rid of stress, whether it's through certain activities or stress relief balls or whatever, like the reason those exist is because they're needed and they're useful and they're healthy. Um, so unless we, again, according to Han Selye, unless we deal with stress in the resistance stage, if we reach exhaustion, we don't have any resource. Oh, goose, excuse me. Sorry. If we don't have any bodily and physiological resources to deal with it, psychological resources, and we are going to have very negative effects because of it, according to his understanding of it. And like I said, pretty much everything he said in this. Sorry. Let me get rid of that. So pretty much everything he said in this has been proven to be true. So it's not a theory. It's really fact. It's just a way to look at how we deal with stress. Um, and again, if you think back, I, I can only go off of my own personal experience, but I know that when I get really, really super stressed out, which I can honestly say I feel like I'm pretty laid back compared to some, so I don't get like super stressed out very often. But when I do, I have to find a way to get rid of it, whether that is doing something completely opposite of what is causing me to be stressed. Like if I'm really stressed with school or whatever, then I'm going to to get away from that. I'm gonna do something that has nothing to do with that. I'm going to do something mindless. Like if I'm constantly thinking about, so I'm going to do something that doesn't require me to think. I'm going to watch a stupid TV show or play video games or something to just completely mindlessly do something. Some people work out, some people eat. I mean, we talked about all this earlier, but and when we talked about catharsis, but those are, if they're healthy, those are good. Now, obviously, there are some unhealthy, responses to stress, but you have to do it. You have to do it, or your body is going to deplete its resources. All right. So again, that's it for emotion. Like I said, very short overall. Our next topic this week is personality. It's a little bit longer, a couple more videos, but yeah, we'll get into that next. So see you guys a little bit later.